Okay, so we are live. Welcome to everybody in the chat. Thank you guys for coming through, for hanging out. Uh, Captain Dadpool is in the house. Paula Gia is in the house. Still waiting to become a
That
cartoon.
guy.
Hey, who else we got here? Michael in the house.
Oh my god, yay.
And most importantly, I have Shannon Q in the house.
Hi.
So this is a treat for me. We chatted, I think, about maybe 3 months ago. This
Hmm.
year is getting underway.
Yep.
We are in June already. I think we chatted back in maybe February or something like that.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yeah, time flies.
Right.
Uh,
Rolled.
what's new in your world? Did I see something on your Facebook page where you were testing out lipstick
Yes, I was.
for
We have
something that has nuptials in it?
not my wedding. Not my wedding.
Oh,
Not
okay.
my wedding. No, no, no. A niece's wedding. A
Oh,
niece's
okay.
wedding.
I was about to. I don't pay attention to celebrity, gossip, so I didn't know if there was like
Oh my
some
god.
news in the wind.
Celebrity. God, you're funny. Yeah, no, 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 no,
Okay.
no, 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 no. We're not getting married. Not currently. Maybe one
Okay.
day. We'll
Okay.
see, but not right now.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Have you guys? I'm late, so once again, I don't watch celebrity gossip. Have you guys solved the coffee table issue?
Yeah, currently we're not getting a coffee table, but I am
Okay.
getting a wine hutch.
Huh.
That's a fair compromise. I'm getting a
Okay.
wine hutch for the dining room. You hear that,
Okay.
Paul? I'm getting a wine hutch for the
Can you
dining
put your
room.
feet up on the wine hutch?
I can't, but I can fill it with wine.
Oh, okay.
And I can drink that while
And
I'm
it'll
being
feel like your
reminded of the
feet are up
fact I have
once
nowhere
you.
to put my drinks.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we are going to do some live chat soon. If you guys want to super chat a question or comment in $5 and up, we will be reading live chats. That just helps me to maintain. If you are a subscriber to Ichabod, we have some plans, me and my regular crew, Jay Witt and Albert. That'll help us to finance some things that we got planned, maybe some more live shows with all of us in the same room.
Mm.
We need some tech so that we can get Jay Witt on live. Y'all know we distort Jay Witt's voice. He's in Jehovah's Witness Protection Program. He doesn't want anyone to know he's an atheist in his real life. So we distort his voice. We're trying to find a way to distort his voice live.
Ooh.
And if you know some software, something like that, hit me up. Other than that, we have to find ways to do that. It's probably going to cost a little bit. So yeah, super chat, like, subscribe, comment. All of that helps us out. And I'm not sure if the crew that calls themselves the Brady Bunch, if they're in the house yet, but if you guys are, what's up? If not, I'll see you guys chiming in pretty soon. I have Shannon Q here. And Shannon, I said this when you had me on your channel. Thanks for that.
Happy to.
But when I deconverted and everybody was, sharing my coming out as a
Mm,
non-Christian video, you were the first person that hit me up and said, hey, if you, first of all, you offered support, like you're not alone.
of
And
course.
then you said, if you ever want to, chat or tell your story or just come on my channel, you offered that. And you were the first person. And even though it took about a year, when we finally did connect, you were so gracious to me. You were very supportive. Even when I shared just things about my personal life, you were non-judgmental and just
Of course
supportive.
not.
And I appreciate you to no end. So just
I
thank you for
appreciate
being you.
you. I felt so awful because so many other people were telling your story for you
Mm,
and augmenting it so that they could present you in the way that helps them continue whatever narrative they're buying into. And
yeah,
that's awful. That was
yeah.
that was horrible to watch. I'd never met you, but I knew
Mm,
empathetically that that's
wow.
like that's not okay. That's not a good way to feel. And just coming out of what you came out of, I didn't know what your support system looked like, but I knew that somebody
Mm,
like you, having been somebody like
right.
you and knowing many
Mm,
people that were like you in that situation, um, needed people
yeah,
who had similar experience to say, "Hey, like
yeah.
there's solidarity here. Like you
Wow.
you you have a place."
And I didn't have a support system. I had
I'm
one
sorry.
or two friends who had deconverted prior to me deconverting. And so I could rely on them. But in terms of system, no system.
Right.
But we're going to talk about this tonight. I would love to hear if any of this comes up in your story.
Okay.
There was such an intestinal fortitude in me having deconverted and having made that decision, like owning that decision and feeling like I can stand on my own too, that even if it was going to be just me against the world, I was okay with that
Hmm.
because of what I had to go through to get to that point.
Right.
So then to find out that there were other people in a system, that was just, there was just gratis, grace on top. So, yeah. Oh, Paul, thank you. I see that. I would love to chop it up with you because if we can get that going, uh, there's guys on my channel, Jay Witt on my channel. People are like craving to have more of him, but because he's so limited in what he can do, because he doesn't want his identity shown. Yeah, if we can get that live, that would be great. So I will be hitting you up.
Oh, he'd be the one. He could totally help you with that.
Okay, good
Mr.
stuff.
Tech Guru.
Yes, good stuff. So let me read a Facebook post.
Huh.
I've been causing trouble on Facebook for the last year and a half. Just
Doesn't sound like
asking,
you.
just asking people to think through things. I'm thinking through things. I'm processing things. And I often see Christians, my Christian friends, people who prior to my deconversion, I would post and they would be the first to like, to share, to now I'm watching them post stuff and I don't want to say I cringe, but man, I read the post and I'm like, was that me?
Yeah.
Like with this, the submersive capsule, the people that were in that
Mhm.
would-be submarine that just had that ordeal. I watched how many of my Christian friends felt compelled to turn that into a spiritual message.
Really?
Even
Well,
before
yeah,
we
no,
knew
I'm,
what the
I'm
fate
not
of
sure
those
why
people
I'm
were.
even surprised. I'm not actually surprised.
Yeah, even before we knew what the fate of the people were,
Mm.
they were just they had to find some kind of way to. And I said, man, if I was still a Christian, I would have felt compelled to take whatever was the hot topic and point people to God with it.
Yep.
And now I watch it, I'm just like,
It's weird looking back, eh?
yeah.
It's weird looking back and realizing, oh, wow, like I was so indoctrinated into this
Yeah.
that I saw everything, even things that didn't pertain to me, even things that had nothing to do with me, even things where I had no business chiming in and I wasn't adding to anything. I was making that about me and my faith and thinking that that was me doing good, doing well, doing work.
Well, there's a verse
Great.
that I used to think was in the Bible before I started reading it. But there's a saying that people have, only what you do for Christ is going to last. And so
Okay.
if you're doing things on Facebook or TikTok, and you're not doing it for Christ, what's the point? It's not going to last.
Interesting.
And so anyway, that was the setup for this. There's a friend of mine, he had a post, and I guess I'll just let the cat out the bag now. I screenshot almost everything I see on Facebook because I'm planning to one day say something about it. And so
Put it in the bank.
yeah, I've got just a folder full of, this is going to be a conversation one day. This is going to be so this one guy, he made a post. I'll read his, then I'll read my response when I shared it. And then somewhere down in the thread, you chimed in, and that's what made me say this would be a great Life After Faith episode because of the way you chimed in.
Okay.
So, man, I wish I had this so I could put up on screen, but my guy, Willie Will, he says, be honest. If you lost everything today, would your joy and your peace be lost with it? Assuming that most people would say yes. So he's got counsel for the person who would say yes. He says, don't put your happiness and peace in things that can be lost. God is the only thing you can have and not lose. Let your joy be in him. Many, many Christians on his post, amen, liked, shared, loved. I shared it, but with a caption that says, If I lost everything today, I would still have me. I am enough.
Yeah, that's valid.
I don't feel like I needed something outside of me to be okay.
Right.
And I don't want to necessarily read what you said because I have you here live, but you did chime in. But your response to that, even now in the moment, and then we can get into kind of what you shared.
Well, I mean, on its face, that's good advice. But what I said prior to the stream was, yeah, well, I lost my faith.
Mm,
I lost my faith. So if I had hung everything
mm,
on my faith, which I have in the past, that's not a robust
wow.
strategy for coping,
Mm.
because that also is something that can be lost.
Wow. So
It
I just
clearly
want to
is.
pause. I like having these moments where if there is, oh, why is my charger saying it's not? Oh, bam, there we go. Yeah. Um, if there's a Christian watching, think about what Shannon just said. The advice from Willie Will is, hey, you could lose all this other stuff. Don't put your hope and your peace in that. She says, I lost my faith. Just like everything else, that's something that can be lost. What do you say to that? Just what is your counsel to that? There's a verse in the Bible that says, um, when we're faithless, he's faithful, for he cannot disown, he cannot deny himself or disown his own or something like that. But basically, there's a verse in the Bible that says what Shannon just talked about would not happen. When she's faithless, God would still be faithful. Shannon, you lost your faith how many years ago?
Oh gosh. It was an iterative journey. It
Okay.
wasn't like I woke up one day. I think that it's that way for a lot of people.
Mm,
I started losing my faith in my mid-20s.
mm,
That's when I was, heavy into like my education, and I studied neuroscience. So the soul started to kind of fall away for me, having studied
mm,
neuroscience and there being an interaction problem.
mm,
Um, then as you do, I turned to the word, right? I was like, well,
mhm,
I'm going to read the Bible. I'm going to get myself more educated on this, because clearly
mm.
I'd been educated from the pulpit instead of educating myself.
Okay, so hold on, because what you're going into right now is something that we probably should cover.
Okay.
Did you grow up Christian?
Oh, very competitively.
I've never heard that
Yeah.
adjective. Competitively Christian.
Yeah.
What does
I was
that
the
mean?
first altar girl I was Anglican in my church. There was only altar boys. I was the first altar girl. You're not supposed to get confirmed until you're like a teenager. I got confirmed at 8.
Mm,
I was competitively, I mean, that's an aspect of my personality, I realize now, but
mm,
I was all in for being the best at it.
mm.
Like, I was in it. I
Okay.
was in it.
Now, hold on, because you can rebuke me for this because you've been in this longer than me.
Yeah.
Um, but I want to take stones away from anybody who's willing or who's getting ready to discount your testimony because of you said something unchristian. So
Oh,
you say competitively,
prideful.
and they'll say, "Oh, that's why you were in it because you were just competing." It um,
That
wasn't
wasn't it though.
loyalty,
It
right?
wasn't
Okay,
like, I
yeah,
mean, competitive is a way to describe my drive towards it.
got you.
But the reason that I had that drive towards it was because I felt, and it was instilled in me, that
Hmm,
it's exceptionally important.
got you.
It's exceptionally important. I can't lie and say that there's not an aspect of it that, you know, being a woman raised in the church, like being a young
Mm,
girl at the time raised in the church, wanting to prove that, we can be just as faithful, we can walk the path the same. We
hmm,
can contribute just as much. Like, I have just as much to offer God in the community as anybody else. And I'm
wow,
not going to be
wow.
beholden to a stigma that people like me um
Oh my
can't
gosh.
contribute to the church the same way that, people who were born with different genitalia
Yeah,
than me
yeah.
could. So I wanted to prove to God, the church, and everyone else that
Right.
I was in it. I'm
Mm,
in it with you, God. I
right.
am here. I am standing up. I am being counted. Whatever you ask of the men, I will do it twice to prove to you.
So hold on. Can you please speak to this? Because on my Facebook today, someone chimed in and asked if I thought that the way the Bible has been sort of the ban on women has been loosened so that they can preach, they
Mhm,
can teach, they can serve in more charismatic Pentecostal
mhm.
settings, progressive settings.
Yeah.
They asked if I thought that was a sort of a response to the women's liberation movement, and I said no. I think women like we've seen that in the church and the charismatic side since the holiness movement in the late 1800s.
Mhm.
But then I said, maybe though, before there was an organized women's liberation movement, maybe that was the way women were able to get a voice in a socially acceptable spiritual way
Right.
because they couldn't do it any other way.
Yeah, it's more difficult to deny us a platform when we're, doing what you're doing for God.
Mm,
Because how do you tell us we can't,
right.
right? Without chiding
Yeah.
God or
Right.
without diminishing what you think are good fruits.
And the holiness movement, they were so into moves of the spirit
Mhm.
that even if the spirit was doing things that were against the Bible, like you're speaking in tongues and no one's interpreting all that, because it's the spirit, you can't quote, you can't
Mhm.
silence the spirit. And so if a woman gets the spirit and starts speaking, what are you going to do? Silence the spirit of God in her? So I just wondered if there was something to that. But now that you're saying this, I've never thought about that before. That's very interesting.
Yeah, like it was a way for me to cuz if if you are religious and you want people to believe in God, you want people to believe in God regardless of gender.
Hmm.
So it would say a lot about you and your attitude towards God if you were attempting to quash somebody's journey towards being closer to him,
Hmm.
which is what I was attempting to do,
Yeah.
right? But I knew like that was just a fact of the matter, and I wasn't in a charismatic type church. I was Anglican, so
Hmm.
stand up, sit down, sing a song, that type
Hmm.
of church.
Right.
And I knew that that was a way to prove my path, to prove my faith, to prove to God as much as anybody else, if not more so,
Hmm.
that I was just as devout towards him and it was just as important to me as anybody else to do it. So whatever the bar was, which happens a lot, right? Like there's people for which the bar is set here and it's easy to hurdle, and there's people for like that are told you can't even like run the race. Like you
Hmm.
don't even get to jump the hurdles. So
Wow.
you have to put more hurdles in front of you to prove.
Yeah.
Not only can I jump that hurdle you jumped, I can jump all the hurdles. I'll jump extra hurdles.
So there's so many things you're saying that I'm like, ooh, that ties into this. As an African American,
Mhm.
there's so many stories that are told where people. I was just watching Chevalier, the story about the he's French and African,
Oh,
basically compete.
Chevalier. Yeah.
Chevalier, yeah,
Yeah.
competing with Mozart and all that.
Mhm.
But he talked about why he had to be so excellent in everything that he was doing.
Mhm.
Because of the color of his skin and the place where he was, he had to excel. And that's a story that you hear from African Americans in America.
100%.
And then so when you're talking about as a woman having to compete, even in a spiritual sense, it's just clicking all over the place for me. Like, I get it. I get it. Um,
Yeah, white dude pro patriarchy isn't the best.
wow. Okay. So competitively Christian makes
Mhm.
a whole lot of sense now. And from how young?
Oh, I don't remember not being in
Gotcha.
church.
Okay.
I just don't remember not being in church.
Hmm.
I was always in church. Like Sunday morning, my grandmother would pick me up. My mom couldn't go to church because she was divorced. Um, But that didn't like, my grandmother came and picked me up, and she was very much a matriarch and like, oh my God, like the perfect person.
Hmm.
She was very much the perfect person. So she would come pick me up. We'd go to the flea market on Sunday mornings. And then after the flea market, we would go to church.
Okay.
And then we would go to
Memories.
Sunday
That's
school,
good.
like to the
Yeah.
point, like she was all in with me.
Hmm.
Um, I was the oldest grandchild.
Mm.
And she took me to my confirmation lessons. The
Mhm.
confirmation lessons, because to get confirmed, most people were like 13, 14, 15. I was in elementary school at the time. I was in grade 5, I think. Yeah, no, I was definitely in grade 5 when this happened. So she would come pick me up from the elementary school and drive me to the junior high, because they had them there at the junior high, because the students would just stay after class for the confirmation lessons, because they were already in the school and their parents would pick them up when they're done. She would have to take me from my elementary school to the junior high to sit in a classroom to be educated with all of these, preteens and teenagers.
Boys,
when I was in
right?
elementary school.
Boys or girls, or just boys?
Boys and girls. Yeah,
Boys and girls,
everybody
okay.
can get confirmed.
Gotcha.
For sure.
Okay.
Like there's no relegation on, like, there's no rule saying like a
Okay.
boy can do it and a girl can't.
Mhm.
Absolutely anybody of that age who wants to be confirmed within the church
Gotcha.
can be confirmed within the church. Like, it's an extra layer on top of baptism. Like, we baptized at birth. And then you like reaffirmed your commitment.
Gotcha.
to
Like
the
making
church,
it yours,
essentially.
basically.
Right. Exactly.
Oh,
Like
okay.
you are taking it on yourself. You are making the decision yourself to become a part of the church at that point. It's similar to, I guess it would be called catechism in Catholicism. But in the Anglican Church, it's the rite of confirmation.
Okay. So you grow up in this, basically having what you believe is a fervent relationship with God.
Yep. 100%.
Worshiping, singing songs, sharing your faith with people.
Yeah. Constantly being at the church, in the youth group, everything.
Okay.
Yeah. All of it.
Okay. And so how do you lose that? Or how do you, I know you said the neuroscience thing made you
That's what made
questions.
me turn.
Okay.
That was the first, ooh, this doesn't seem right. I don't know if I can have a soul if any of this is true. And this is demonstratively true. There's got to be something, right?
Right.
And I kind of realized that, although I had done all this stuff, like I had done everything that was asked of me. I went to all the study groups. I went to all the confirmation classes. I went to Sunday school. I did all this stuff. I realized that I had never actually picked up the Bible and read it cover to cover. I had read what was assigned to me and little bits extra, like, when you have like a crisis, there's passages you turn to, sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
But I'd never actually read it cover to cover and really put my heart into it. So I was like, okay, maybe that's a problem. I don't have the full context. So I started reading it cover to cover. Like, I picked up my Bible and started reading it and was like, oh God, oh shit. Oh no. Oh man. Frig. And what really did it for me was it conflicting directly with my conceptualizations of what was and wasn't moral, like as an internal critique. Like the things God was doing and the things God deemed as moral or immoral and the things God was silent on. I had a significant problem with that because I thought those things were wrong. So I had to reconcile to myself, well, what do I base my moral system on? Because I've always been told and believed and was certain that my moral system was based on this book because God's perfect. And is where I derive my morals from. But if that's where I derive my morals from, and I'm a fully faithful person, and I'm like very involved in my faith, and I'm having trouble reconciling this, where do my morals come from then? Because they can't come from here because I'm having trouble. And I feel like I might be right and he's wrong, and I can give justifications for that.
You thought you got the sense that you were more moral than God.
Right. Yeah, like I had took umbrage with some of the things that he was doing in the book, like the story of Jephthah. Did it cross your mind
that maybe you just didn't understand why it was okay for God to do those things?
Right. No, I reconciled with all that dissonance, right? Like all of that stuff went through my head. It was a difficult period of time, as I'm sure you can relate, where you're like, well, I don't understand this stuff, right? And then I would keep reading more things. And one of the passages that really did it for me, it was in Numbers, I think it's 21 or 22, the test for the unfaithful wife. Because I had always been told abortion, 100% no. Absolutely not. And I got to that part, and God hadn't spoken about abortion at all. He killed a bunch of babies, killed a whack of babies up to that point, just like piles of babies. And then I get to this point, and I'm like, okay, so if you think your wife's been unfaithful, you can take her to the tabernacle, like to the man of
priest.
faith,
Yeah.
and he gets her to drink dirt water.
Hmm.
And if she's been unfaithful, God will make her have an abortion.
Hmm.
So God kills babies because people are unfaithful. Like he judges these children because of the actions of the person whose womb they're in. And I was just like, this is that. I like literally. Have you ever had your Bible and like had this realization, like had this epiphany, and just been like I literally tossed it. I was like, I needed to get it away. I needed to get it away from me.
Wow.
I was wild about it. Wild about it. Like Jephthah bothered me. Like reading Genesis for the very, very, very first time cover to cover and realizing that God put people on earth, and oh wait, shit, then he did it again. Like a couple of verses later, so I was like, he just put people there, and now he's making Adam again. That's strange. I can reconcile, like there's reasons that I can reconcile that. But the further and further I went, the more that I thought about it, not even critically, but deeply.
Yeah.
Like the more I was trying to invest myself in it so that I could find something that I needed in it, the more it was letting me down over and over and over again and giving me more questions than answers.
Were the ministers around you no help, or did you feel like maybe they were biased in what they would have to say, or what?
Well, at that point in time, I wasn't around my church because I was in university. So I did have like, there's a church on campus where I went to university. So I did have conversations with the pastors there. And I felt very dismissed, as though the answer was read more, turn to the word, always was the answer. Like when they got to the point that they couldn't answer my question, the answer was turn to the word. And I'm like, turning to the word is what got me here in front of you. So clearly it's not doing what you think it's doing. And if you can't answer my questions, that's a problem. So what are we like? What do we do here? Like, you can't answer my questions. I feel like they're legitimate. You're telling me that I'm not reading the Bible enough. The reason I'm here is because, or I'm not, or the right way. Yeah. You're not going to tell me what the right way is, because there is no such thing as the right way. That's a misnomer. And now I'm here in front of you saying I have all of these questions as a result of doing the very thing you told me I should fucking do. And your answer is do more of the thing that got me here. Are you kidding me right now? Yeah. That's ridiculous. Yeah. You must be kidding. It was awful.
So did you feel yourself slipping away from the faith? Did you sense this is probably it for me?
Not right away. It was probably, it took a couple years. Okay. It took a couple years for me because then I was like, okay, well, I think we all go through these rationalizations where I was like, well, maybe there isn't, like, man wrote the Bible, right? Like it was God's inspired words, but it was still man writing it. So if man was writing it, maybe he got portions of it wrong or incorporated his bias, and we got it wrong just saying it was 100% God's word. But God's still there. Right. God was interacting with these people, and they were doing the best that they could to, like, in the context of their time, like, articulate to the rest of us what God's intentions were. But what I really need to know, and I think that this is just like an emotional state thing, is that God is good. He is good, and he loves me specifically, personally loves me. That's Christian watching, you don't go through what Shannon's talking about if you're just trying to run away from God, or you just want to sin, or you just want, like, the things that she's talking about, these stages of deconversion, this is people trying to salvage whatever they can of their faith. By the skin of our teeth, by like our fingernails, using everything that is available to us to retain it. Okay. because you're taught that that's the person, that's the
Yeah.
entity that
Yeah.
loves you the most, no matter what, no matter who else fails you.
Mm.
There's always going to be a person there,
And if
even if
that's
that
real,
relationship is
who would run
imagined.
away from that if that's real?
Right.
Yeah.
Why would you?
Hmm.
Like, wouldn't that be nice to know that
Right.
no matter what, somebody's got your back, no matter how much you stumble, no matter how much you
Mm.
fail, no matter how bad you are, no matter how long it takes you to recover, there
Mm.
is somebody who loves you regardless without
And there's an
contingencies.
afterlife. Like, who would
Right.
run away from that?
Mm.
This natural desire for longevity.
Mhm.
Who would run away from that? Um,
Well, me
so
now that I've
right.
thought about it critically.
So then the question becomes, okay, so if you're trying to hold on by the skin of your teeth, you're clawing as you're being
Mhm.
dragged away by logic and moral concerns.
Right.
Um, and you're saying, well, maybe I just need to hold on to the person, the entity, God said He loves me. How do you end up letting go of that?
So one of the ways it's kind of a weird story actually. I started to like explore other faiths because I still wanted that thing. Like I read on Buddhism and all this stuff, but nothing really stuck.
Mm,
Nothing really resonated with me. And I still had this like, I guess sort of agnostic-ish,
mm,
loosey-goosey kind of labeled to myself personally as Christianity concept that there was probably somebody up there. Um, and then YouTube kind of started being a thing later on, like in yeah.
okay.
In like I guess like it was after I had my son. Um Early 2010s to 2013. And
Okay.
I wanted to listen to stuff to go to bed because I had a
Mhm,
young child and I was like up and down all night. And my mind I have the type of mind that's constantly like, it doesn't rest unless
mm.
I give myself some distraction. So I started listening to YouTube and I came across the Ken Ham debates with Bill Nye. I came across Christopher Hitchens videos
Mm,
and
wow.
it wasn't so much the arguments they made
Mhm.
as much as it was the concept that atheists exist,
Yes.
really,
Yes.
like at all.
Mhm,
Just there's people who say there is no God. I don't
mm,
believe there's a God, and that's fine. And
mm,
also believing in a God, it could and probably is like a silly thing because these like carefully thought out, well articulated reasons.
mm,
And I was like, oh my God, I think that might be me, but I'm not
mm.
allowing it to be me. And
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
for what reason am I doing that? Like, do I need this? Because, and
Mm,
then I started taking inventory and I'm like, well, when I did need it and I was told that it was what I could turn to, it always failed me and or made things more complicated.
mm,
It was never the tool I needed to be okay, to be better.
mm,
It was always what people told me would be that tool, but I
mhm.
had to build those tools myself. I had to find that architecture and build that infrastructure myself, not utilizing this.
Wow.
In fact, grappling with this was
Mm.
actually making those points in my life more complicated than they needed to be. Whereas if
Okay.
I had just let it go instead of
Yeah.
having to have that like grief, emotional turmoil, and like conflict, like emotionally and in my life personally, if I had never had that to begin with, walking through those really awful times,
Mm.
I wouldn't have had a divided focus.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been
Ooh.
deconverting
Mm.
while I was trying to rebuild my entire life because some horrible shit had happened to me during that period of time as well.
Mm.
So I was grappling with that, doing what I was told to do, which was turn to my faith. And not only was it not helping me, it was causing me more pain trying to hold on to it.
Are you willing to? You don't have to maybe put some meat on that skeleton for the person who's listening. Like when you talk about going through something horrible and you're deconverting at the same time, like because I guess that gets into the whole idea of you saying So I didn't read it, but I guess I'll read it now.
Sure.
When I said to my guy's post, if I lost everything today, I would still have me and I'm enough. You commented, I once gave up everything I have on purpose to regain who I was. I've lost everything multiple times for various reasons, and each time I was fine in the end. It's taught me to be fearless and assess what actually matters in life. And then this is the part that got me. You said, and I do it all again.
Uh-huh.
So I guess as detailed or as vague as you'd like to be, like, could you maybe help somebody with what can a person go through that would make them think what you just said? And my faith didn't help. As a matter of fact, I had to find other more practical tools that my faith wouldn't give me.
Well, I can go back to when I was starting to initially lose my faith in my mid-20s.
Mm.
And this might be kind of, like, I don't know, might be kind of rough to hear. I'm not sure. But in my mid-20s, my relationship that I was in, it was a long-term relationship. I was living with this person. I was in university, completely disintegrated. And one of the reasons it disintegrated was because my stepbrother, had shot and killed my grandmother, my step-grandmother.
Mm.
And that, me going through that emotional turmoil and like media coverage and all of that nonsense, wasn't something that my partner at the time was super willing to cope with. So he thought it might be better if we part ways. I had nowhere to go. So I would shower at the school gym. I would sleep in the library. I would study there. I would couch surf, but with friends
Oh, so
who,
wait, the parting ways was you're going through too much. I can't be with you while you're going through that.
that amongst other things,
Okay.
he didn't feel like I was a super responsible person, and he thought that he was super responsible. And at the time, maybe I wasn't too. So like, to be fair to him, it wasn't just that,
Okay.
but it did correspond with that
Mm.
taking place. Like, I don't want to paint him as the worst person.
Okay.
He wasn't an abuser. He wasn't the
Mhm.
worst person. It's just, I was going through severe emotional turmoil
Mhm.
and didn't have the best coping mechanisms at the time, and
Gotcha.
wasn't super responsible at the time. And that's not great in a relationship. But so like, part of me understands, part of me is
Mhm.
still bitter, but yeah, it's not entirely him just being a bad
Gotcha.
dude. So I don't want to give that impression.
Mm.
But yeah, so I went through all of that and was still gripping desperately to my faith. And
Mhm.
and that's one of the reasons I was trying so hard to hold on to it, because I
Mm.
was taught, as most of us are, that in times like that, I was dealing with the worst thing
Mm.
and a breakup and being homeless while working 2 to 3 jobs and trying to pay my way
Mm.
through university, not having anywhere to live, and
Wow.
still trying as hard as I could to keep it.
Mm.
As hard as I could to keep it. Doing everything that people taught me to do. And the
Mhm.
more of that I did, the more I was like, the answers aren't here.
To keep your faith is what you're saying.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
keep my faith,
Mhm.
to keep myself on the rails. I
Mm.
needed to do something to keep myself on the rails, but that didn't end up being what kept me on the rails.
Mm.
What kept me on the rails was, friends, not friends in the church, but friends in
Mhm.
general, who were willing to support me, give me a place
Mm.
to sleep, give me like a place to just stay, even like
Mm.
out of graciousness for the night, not because they were Christians, but because they were
Mm.
friends.
Hmm.
And throwing myself into figuring out how to build a better life for myself, trying to figure out who
Mm.
I was as an individual, trying to
Right.
figure out what my place was in the world, trying to figure out what I wanted to contribute, trying to
Mm.
figure out, like, going through that is kind of a blessing in the end,
Mhm.
because it shocked me into figuring out who I actually was
Yeah.
and who I actually wanted to be.
Yeah.
And what I could do to be independent, and that I
Mm.
didn't necessarily need anybody. And it taught
Yeah.
me about my strength, and it taught
Wow.
me about everything that I could do and was capable of doing.
Yeah.
And that's why I would do all of it again. And
Mm.
like, there's other times in my life that I've just been like, okay, I'm out. We're going to restart. That's fine. We're just going to hit the reset button, because it taught
Mm.
me I can do that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can walk through that and be okay. I can get to the other side of it.
Right.
But the deconversion coinciding with it
Mm-hmm.
just made it more complicated
Mm.
and didn't help me. And the reason that it made it more complicated and didn't help me is because I was trying so desperately to keep that faith.
Yeah.
If I had have just let it go,
Mm-hmm.
I would have been better off through that journey,
Right.
because I could have focused on what I needed.
And you've gone through other struggles, battles since then without the faith. And I guess from experience now, you can get through tough things without the faith.
Yeah. And I
Okay.
no longer have those complications. Like, if I had to hit the reset button on my life tomorrow,
Mm.
I would be able to just focus in on a plan. I wouldn't have this additional level of emotional struggle that was like tearing me apart internally to contend with
Yeah.
concurrently, like simultaneously.
Yeah.
I would just be able to be like, okay, well, I know I'm going to be okay. I've been okay in the past. These are the things I need to do. These are the steps I need to take. This is the type of analysis
Mm.
that I need to place on myself introspectively to figure out what my part in this was, so that I don't repeat
Wow.
that behavior. I know that I know everything, not everything. Like,
I
I'm
got
not,
you. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I have a much better idea
Mm-hmm.
of how to assess what my role is in a situation, how to assess how to correct behavior going forward, how to like kind of triage what needs to take place next, how to
Yeah.
retroactively figure out what I need to take on board to make sure that I don't make similar mistakes in the future. I can do all of that without faith.
You got more tools now.
Right. And there's nothing in the way of me accessing those tools. There's nothing telling me that those tools are selfish too. Because in the past, I'd been told that those tools are selfish, because I was focusing on myself. What I should do is turn to the church, or turn to the word, or turn to God. Like,
Wow.
focusing on you is prideful.
Yeah.
But that was just driving me into the ground. It was just
Mm.
driving me to the ground. And now I'm in a position,
Right.
because I was able to focus on who I am and how to assess myself and how to hold myself accountable and what
Yeah.
accountability looks like.
Mm.
Now I'm in a position where I can help lots of people.
Mm.
I can help lots of people. I'm much healthier.
Jeez.
I can contribute to society better
Yeah.
without having to figure out whether or not the people I love, the people I support, the people I want to assist, whether or not they meet the metric bar of whether or not I should be condemning them and telling them to be different, or telling them that they're not good enough, or telling them that they should, not love themselves the way that they need to be loved. Now all of that is out of the way. I don't have any of that baggage. I can just help people and figure out what they need without contending with the rest of the nonsense that I was carrying with me, that I saw as a barrier to entry to figuring out how to best love and support people. I don't have those barriers to entry now.
Wow. So if I could comment on that, I experienced that. Another thing that is a relief for me is I don't have an ulterior motive with people. Because before,
Solid
if I was
point.
doing any of that, helping people, loving on people,
Mhm.
whatever, the ulterior motive was, at some point, I've got to make the switcheroo, because I'm really
Right.
here just to give you the gospel. And so the pressure and I never felt false as a Christian doing that,
Yeah.
but there was a certain amount of pressure of, I always felt like a spy. Like I always felt like I was like
Right.
not there for the reason why I said I was there.
Because most of your interactions and relationships were about maneuvering yourself into position where you tell that person they need to be different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now my relationships aren't about maneuvering myself into a position where I tell somebody they need to be different than they currently are. It's about meeting them where they are
Yeah.
and figuring out how to best support them to be a better version of themselves and what they need to do that. Not what I think they need,
Right.
but what they actually legitimately need, what they want. I can actually listen actively without an agenda. I no
Wow.
longer have an agenda in my relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it. So you've started over life after faith. Was it hard? Because you're let me just, for those who may not know, you're an atheist.
Yeah. Hard A atheist. Yes.
Why go from faithful, competitively Christian
hmm
to atheist? Why not some other? Because I know you mentioned maybe trying Buddhism and all that. Why not some other just placeholder for the God character?
A multitude of reasons.
Okay.
Not like it is a journey. I don't know if I
Mm,
can give a synopsis that's going to completely do it justice,
mm,
but ultimately where I landed on my path through this is that I wanted to at least know what the truth is and ground what I believe in a demonstratable version of reality, because that's where I'm going to be armed with the best and most constructive tools.
mm,
So even though it was super emotionally uncomfortable, which is why it drives me bananas
mm,
when people say, well, you did this, because it's more comfortable. Like you wanted to sin, or like they're like this makes your life easier or somehow better. And that like you get some sort of emotional
mm,
appeasement from it. That's not the case at all. If anything, I have to contend with my emotions more viscerally now
mm,
than I ever have. And I have to attend with accountability
mm.
more viscerally now than I ever
What
have
do you mean
before,
by that? That's interesting.
because I can't just absolve myself by saying a specific set of words.
Mm,
I can't do something like if
wow.
I do something bad, I have to introspect.
Hmm.
I have to introspect, figure out why I did that,
Hmm.
figure out what that says about me, figure out
As
if I
opposed to
want to
just
change
saying,
that.
"Oh, I'm a sinner," and that's the
Right.
end
I
of
can't just say, well, people are broken
it.
because someone ate an apple that
Mm,
one time
that's good.
and we're all, dirt on the shoes of the universe. But lucky for me, I can just say sorry and then I'm good to go again.
Mm,
Back on track. Done. Sorted. I can't do that anymore.
mm,
But to answer your initial question, I no longer, and once I realized that faith had been complicating things for me, complicating things that didn't need to be complicated, complicating things in a detrimental way, and
mm,
complicating and like it made me detrimental to other people as well, I think,
mm.
to a certain degree.
How
Um,
so?
I was I was very pro-life. I
Mhm.
was
Okay.
I had like not as much homophobia as most Christians do, but a lot
Mhm.
of internalized hate because I'm bisexual. And I thought that I was absolutely deviant. And I projected that out by thinking that it was like
Mm,
gross for other people as well.
mm.
Um, and that would color my interactions with people if I was interacting with
Wow.
somebody who I saw as being like sexually deviant. Like I have a completely different perspective now for the record.
Mm,
Um, I wouldn't, be outwardly bigoted against them, but I had a lot of internalized
mm,
ideas about what that meant about them as a person and
mm,
what they should be like and how they should change. And I thought that my thoughts were disgusting, so their thoughts must be disgusting. Like
mm.
all of that stuff, all of that baggage that had been instilled with me,
Yeah.
and more too, like just judgments of people in general. I felt very, very entitled to judge
Mm,
other people.
mm. Wow.
And I don't feel that way anymore. I'm more empathetic.
Oh my gosh. If I showed you some of the screenshots from
Oh, I
my
bet.
Christian Facebook friends,
Mm,
talk about feeling entitled to judge people. Oh my gosh. And but losing that when you deconvert, it's
mhm.
such a relief.
Isn't it great?
Oh my gosh.
It's like it's like you've been trying to breathe underwater,
Mm.
and now you realize that you can just put your head up. Like, "Oh,
Beautiful.
shit, I could have just like, oh, there we go. Now
Yeah.
I can breathe."
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Like, I had been throttling myself.
Mm.
And
So let
now,
me,
no, I don't need to.
let me ask you this. Me and my guys, we're going to do an episode of Ichabod about this, but I'm just curious for you.
Mhm.
Well, first, how long has it been since you've been totally deconverted?
I would say that I like fully adopted the like moniker of atheist, like non-believer for sure, because
Hmm.
atheist is even still a new one for me because like the philosophy of what is an
Hmm.
atheist, what's an
Hmm.
agnostic got to me for a while. But like I don't believe in God. Um, I'm 41, 7, 8 years.
Okay.
I would have owned that. I was
Wow. So hold on, I'm
probably
just doing some
on,
math. You started going through this process, you
yeah.
said in your 20s,
Yes.
and you've only been totally deconverted for 7 or 8 years. So that means
Right.
there's about a good 13, 14-year period that you were slowly deconverting.
Yeah, so from 25 to well, less than that.
Okay.
I'd say like 25 to 32,
Okay.
33. I was like I mentioned, like I had this like sort of idealized version of a god that I could keep holding on
Got you.
to.
Got you.
That I was just like, this will be good enough, and I can just compartmentalize that
Okay.
and keep him because it's emotionally
Yeah.
satisfying for me.
Yeah.
Um, but I can still explore other
Yeah.
faiths sort of thing and see where I stand. Like I felt like I had that freedom a little bit, but I still had a little bit of guilt because I
Yeah.
believed he was up there
Okay.
going, "Don't do that."
So the slow
It's
roast was
heresy,
about
Shannon.
7 or 8 years of a slow roast. Mine
Oh,
was
for
about
sure.
mine was about 6 years
Yeah, that's
of
what
a slow
average.
roast. Um, my all that was leading up to this question. I'm very curious how you're going to respond to this.
Uh-oh.
Is any of it still with you? Like, do you have to still fight your Christian mind about things, or is
Um,
it totally dead?
I feel like most of my epistemology now is not based on that. And like that was an active choice
Hmm.
that I've made over the course of like the preceding 6, 7 years, right? It was an active choice that I had to make to like try to build a sound epistemology that like was actually, and this was one of the reasons that I was like, I am an atheist because I
Mm,
need to figure out
got you.
what my perspective and what my worldview is. I need to
Hmm.
let it go
Mm,
and work on
yeah.
something tangible in reality.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that there's always going to be like vestigial aspects of that indoctrination that are components of my thought process,
Hmm.
whether I realize it or not.
Yeah.
Like deconstruction is something that's probably going to be happening with me actively
Mm,
for the sizable portion of the rest of my life
wow.
because it
Wow.
happens from birth.
Right. Your formative years. This
Right.
was, yeah.
So like so much of what you take for granted as tacit knowledge about how you interact with the world and other people and
Hmm.
view things has been bent towards that lens
Mm,
by your community, by your church, by your parents, by like all of it.
mm,
That sometimes it will
yeah.
like pop up and you don't realize it. Like
Mm,
for example, I've recently over the like I think it was like 2 to 3 years ago, really grappled with the idea that forgiveness is something that is inherently beneficial and that you should do it for yourself and that it's almost something that is a necessity for you to heal and move forward,
mm,
right? Because we're taught that through the faith. Like
mm.
forgiveness is something that you absolutely need to do. It wasn't until the last couple of years that I realized that you actually don't. And it's not necessarily beneficial to
Mm,
put yourself in a position when you're grappling with being the victim of somebody
mm,
to drive yourself towards figuring out a way to forgive them.
mm,
Because if you're mentally and emotionally focused on that, which people are driving us towards, like the society in general is driving us towards that, saying it'll be good for you, it'll be good for you. You're doing it for you, not for that person. Like, instead of that, like it would be so much better if we say, you know what, you don't ever have to forgive them. Figure out what you need to do to be okay. If you decide to forgive them, totally on you. You don't have to. That is so much better mentally for someone, because it now shifts the focus on them instead of the onus being on them to figure out a way to justify why that person should be absolved of what they did. Like,
wow.
So that's something just even recently that I've been like, shit, like I just took that for granted.
Yeah. But I mean, it makes sense though, because you're talking about holding yourself more accountable.
Yeah.
And being more introspective and of your own feelings. If you're doing that to yourself, why not do that for someone else?
For sure.
Yeah.
Right. Especially if that person doesn't take accountability.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? Then you're just saying words, and you're saying words that could potentially hurt you because they haven't done anything to absolve themselves. Haven't done anything functionally to make what they did, like even acknowledge what they did. So having the focus there is really taking the focus away of the person who needs it, who is the victim of a situation. Like, so that's an example of something that I just took for granted. And I'm sure there's more that I'll come across, but that's a recent one that I was like, holy shit, like, why do we do that? Why?
Wow.
And I realized that like my conceptualization of love was wrapped in a schematic of abuse, because I was taught that love was contingent on how much you loved the other person and how much you would perform for them to make them feel loved. And that if you didn't reach that bar and hit a place of inadequacy, then there was a justification for someone who is supposed to love you and love you the most to emotionally punish you as a form of penance so that you could line yourself up with what they needed. And what does that sound like? What does that sound like? The person who's supposed to love you the most is going to punish you if you don't do it right.
Yeah. Wow.
Like I realized all of that was latent within me.
Yeah.
And none of it is healthy. So I'm better now for being able to critically analyze how I interact with relationships, how I interact with other people. I am better at it, and I am better for them than I would have been had I still been in that faith, with that scaffolding guiding my interactions.
Wow. So I'm trying to formulate a question here. We're about to wrap up, guys. So if you got a question for Shannon Q, or even for myself, we're going to take a few super chats, $5 and up. We'll read the question, comment online. If not, we're going to wrap up pretty soon. So get your questions in.
I already see the people saying that my faith wasn't strong enough to withstand suffering. Guess they didn't hear, because I was okay.
Yeah.
For like, I was still Christian for years after that happened. Yeah. For years after that happened.
I'm trying to get myself to the point where I don't
think that like that's an okay thing to say to somebody. Like, judge not lest ye be judged and all that, right? Like, you think you know someone else's mind. Like, I didn't deconvert because I was suffering. I want to make this abundantly clear, because I see it in your chat right now. And I just want to make it super clear. My suffering wasn't the reason for my deconversion at all. It was the reason I turned to God. I turned to God because that's what I was told to do when I was suffering. He was not there, nor was any support that was supposed to come from it or him, which is fine. I justified that to myself at the time by saying he's giving me a trial. And I remained a Christian.
Wow.
For years. Years after that happened. 4 years. I didn't hit suffering and then say, you know what, I'm out.
Right.
I
Hmm.
hit suffering, said, I need God,
Yeah.
did everything that I was supposed to do to get support from God, didn't really get it, and still justified it
Hmm.
as it being my fault.
It's so abusive. Isn't that relationship so abusive?
Yes.
Like, he could never be the one in the wrong.
No.
If something doesn't pan out, I'm not doing something right. Or like you said, this is him testing me. He chastises the ones whom he loves. I mean, it's so abusive.
Right. Like that's what I don't think people get. Like they just heard I went through a hard time. That must be why. No, I deconverted intellectually, not emotionally.
Hmm.
I
Wow.
deconverted intellectually. I couldn't the intellectual deconversion caused the emotional turmoil
Hmm.
because I had an emotional relationship with God.
Hmm.
But that was not the reason for the deconversion. That's the reason I tried to keep it.
Yeah.
It's the reason I tried against my own benefit
Hmm.
to keep it. Like,
Wow.
so stop saying that to people. Because one, you
Hmm.
don't know people's minds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And two, you're just demonstrably wrong, specifically in this instance.
Every person that I interview in this series of Life After Faith, I have Christians in the comments. The last one, someone I interviewed, Tim Mills. Tim Mills, goes around interviewing everyone else. But I interviewed Tim Mills,
Mhm.
and one of the first comments was from a frequent commenter, a Christian on my page, and this guy said, "Man," he said, "it's kind of scary to see someone who was as committed as Tim deconvert." But in all the deconversion stories that I share, I think Christians have to listen and say, wait, that's my story.
Mhm.
Minus the deconversion, that's my story. At some point you've got to contend with. So if God is real, then God's allowing these people to have the same experiences and yet still not be kept.
Mm.
And so one of two things. Some people fall back on, oh, then maybe maybe if you had the same experiences I had, then maybe you are still a believer. You just don't know it. Maybe he's still going to save you because of whatever contract he
Yeah.
has with your soul. You're still saved. You just don't know it anymore. Um, but to me,
As I
that's
didn't know it
almost,
before.
well, to me, that's almost a win because at least you're no longer saying, oh, you're not a real Christian.
I
Like
didn't
you,
like, I don't like that. I still like, because you have, and you must hate it too, because you were even more all in, like card carrying, evangelizing to the world
Mm,
than I was. Like, so for someone to have the temerity to be like,
mm,
well, that was all of your life up until this point essentially wasn't real. Your experiences
mm,
and how you felt them and how you existed and what you went through and what you thought, all of that I am going to say,
mhm.
an outsider, am going to say all of that's invalid. And the reason I'm saying all of that is invalid is because if I say even some of that is valid, then
Mm,
I have to contend with the fact that, oh,
yeah,
maybe you're justified in where you're at right
yeah,
now.
yeah.
But I can't allow you that justification.
Right.
Because if I allow you that justification, if I don't find some way to scapegoat your deconversion,
Mm,
to put it back on you for not being faithful enough,
right.
for suffering too much, for wanting to sin, if I don't find a reason to impugn your motives,
Mm,
then and I accept them at face value, then I have to contend with what that means.
yep. It
And I
threatens
don't want to
their,
do that. I
yeah.
want you to wear it so that I don't have to.
Right.
So you're doing that to
Mm,
people,
mm,
by the way.
wow. I could not have said it better. I cannot have said it better. Um, Life after faith for you has been a journey that, as you look back, you say, man, I wish. Tim Mills said this, and I titled the episode this because I think it was so precious. He said, it felt like I hit the lottery when I lost my faith.
Oh,
That's not to
absolutely.
say that it wasn't painful. That's
Right.
not to say that it didn't come with its own set of challenges, but the freedom the independence, the getting closer to truth. Like we were Christians because we wanted truth. When we realized, like, oh, that's not truth, that part of us doesn't change. We just move closer to, oh, well, then if that's not truth, what is? So we're still those same people. Um, but I like sharing these stories because I talk to people every day. Some of them are nowhere near ready to say, I don't believe anymore. But
which
I
is fine.
talk to them every day. And they're at different stages of the deconversion. And so when they hear your story, my story, Tim's story, they can pinpoint, oh, okay, I'm not there yet, but when Shannon said this, I'm there. When she talked about that, I've had that experience. So these are helping people. That's why I'm doing this. Um, you don't get. I got 1,000 or something subscribers. I'm not making money off of YouTube. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this because people are being helped.
For
I think
sure.
I saw one super chat. I'm gonna go up and find that super chat
Awesome.
and
Send
let me
more super
scroll up.
chats. Support Brady.
Scroll up and make sure there's no more. Albert Kim is in the house. What's up, Albert?
I love him.
Hey.
Love him.
Um,
So articulate and like interesting, and like his perspectives are. Sorry, I'm not going to just gush over Albert, but
oh, I
his
don't know if you saw, but in the other Facebook account that you have, I sent you a message saying we critiqued or reviewed.
I watched the video.
Okay. uh,
Oh man, yeah, I
yes.
watched the video, the precept video. Yes,
Your
yeah.
debate with Darth Dawkins is going to go down in YouTube history.
What's funny is it wasn't even supposed to be a debate. I refused to agree to a debate, and I only had 45 minutes notice it was even happening. And I was
Mm.
like, I'll only do it if it's a dialogue. And like, I would love to talk to him about this. And he
Yeah.
agreed. And then I got there and started talking about it. And it became very clear. Oh, and pre-sup is so boring because it's all question begging, right? So I
Yeah.
could have just
Yep.
been like, yeah, you know what? God's in premise one and the conclusion. That's question begging, blah, blah, blah. Not interesting. But once I realized that he utilized abuse strategies in his rhetorical tactics
Mm,
in order to be able to badger somebody or abuse them into like answering questions in a specific manner that he wanted them to, it became more interesting to me and amusing to just point out publicly what his
yeah.
rhetorical strategies
Yeah.
were and just kind of
Yeah.
amuse myself for the rest of the conversation. So anyway, I had no idea it was going to have the
Right.
reach it did until
Yeah.
so yeah. Anywho,
All right.
whoops.
So Charles Payette. I don't know if this is the question. It just says my initial deconversion took 5 to 6 years. Final deconstruction took Final deconstruction took another 10 years.
Wow.
Just want to support and encourage Brady with the wonderful work you're doing on your channel. Thank you so much, Charles, and I appreciate your comment here and your comments in the videos on a regular.
Awesome. Wow. I never take that.
All right, that was a super chat, and I don't see any more, guys. So if there are no more super chats, I'm going to ask Shannon anything you want to plug, anything you want to point people to. Where can they find you?
I have a YouTube channel that I post on periodically. It's just called Shannon Q. There's a lot of back catalog there. So if you're interested in the intersection of psychology and faith or complex conversations about the subject of faith, people's deconversion, sometimes I talk to Christians, sometimes I talk to scholars. I talk to anybody I find interesting. I'm very, very lucky. That's how Brady and I found each other.
What's your elevator pitch for the conversations about psychology and faith, with that nexus, or like what fascinates you about that? What have you learned? Like, I don't know. I'm not asking for your whole discography, but
For sure. I think that in apologetics specifically, and I mean, I have a degree in psychology, I have a background in it. So I found like exposing myself to like the apologetics and counter apologetic sphere, there was a lot of arguments being used on both sides
hmm,
that reference psychology in this sort of colloquial armchair psychologist, not actually looking at the science kind of way.
hmm,
And I didn't appreciate that
hmm,
because I didn't appreciate that from people who are like, I guess, ostensibly like on my side or whatever, because I felt like they weren't representing the science well. And I didn't appreciate it on the other side because I felt like they were purposefully misrepresenting
Hmm.
the science or like not taking it seriously.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be able to
Hmm.
put it out there in a more like very well cited, like
Hmm.
well explained way. And I also wanted to speak to people who are experts in the field, because a lot of people who have a background in psychology don't really like amble their way into this sphere, maybe because
Yeah.
they're like healthier mentally. I don't know. You don't see a lot of them
Yeah.
addressing these
Hmm.
concepts. And also, like I mentioned, one of my linchpins of deconversion was the soul.
Hmm.
So I see a lot of people talking about discussions and dialogues about like what the soul is and what consciousness is from a philosophical perspective. I
Hmm.
don't see many people actually like critically interacting with the neuroscience, and I think that that is
Hmm.
paramount. I don't think that you can kind of brush over the neuroscience and just focus on the philosophy, because if you're going to do the philosophy well, you should incorporate the neuroscience, because that's a tangible material part of reality that we can demonstrate in a multitude of ways.
Hmm.
So if you're not incorporating it well or at all, then you're not doing the concept justice. And I'm
Wow.
not a philosopher, but I do know an awful lot about neuroscience.
Yeah.
So I thought that I could contribute to the conversation and the dialogue in that way. So
Hmm.
people who are predominantly listening to philosophical discussions could at least be armed with a little bit more of the actual information on the science surrounding neuroscience and how it pertains to those arguments.
Do you give sources like books that people can check out that'll help put them more on a? Okay, yeah, I'm going to
Yeah.
check that out, because that's something that if I'm going to be doing this, I want to have some of that under my belt so that I don't misrepresent
Oh,
the
I could
science.
give you a total list of books. If you're going to start with one, like not all of the books that I read are counter apologetics books. I just love reading neuroscience books.
Hmm.
A good place to start is probably The Hidden Spring by
Hmm.
Mark Soms. A disparate perspective, but still has a lot of really good neuroscience groundwork in it, but has like a different sort of theory, is Being You by Anil Seth. Those are
I'm going to
two.
my Amazon
Yeah,
wish list right now to put these
they're
books in.
great. Being You, it's on my shelf back there, actually. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Being You and The Hidden Spring are two of my favorite books on the concept. Not the least of which being they're both from a neuroscientific perspective, but have a different sort of take on how the neuroscience interacts with consciousness.
Okay.
Um, I think I actually spoke to Mark Soms, who wrote The Hidden Spring, on my channel. Fascinating,
Okay.
super
So I
fun.
can
It's one
find it
of
on
my
your
least
channel.
viewed videos, which drives me
Really?
crazy because it was the best conversation I've maybe
Wow.
ever had on that channel. But yeah, so except for the conversation I had with you, obviously, Courtney.
Oh,
But aside from
uh,
that, it was one of the
you
best.
said The Hidden Spring.
The Hidden Spring by Mark Solms, Solms.
Okay. Yep. So you guys got
So
some
good.
resources to check out there, and I see a few more super chats came in real quick. Oh, and this is only $9 on Kindle. Cool.
Really? Oh wow, that's super inexpensive.
Yes. Um, so I have Richmond Diaz. I'm not sure I'm saying your last name right. Thank you for the super chat. When people pray a lot or listen to music a lot to get close to God, how much is faith and how much is fear that they aren't really believing?
Oh gosh, that would be so contextual. Like it's
Hmm.
not a great idea to speak in generalizations about people's individual experiences with something like that. I mean, if they're in a group, it's easily demonstrated that you can utilize something like music, for example, to set a mood or an atmosphere in a group. You can use it to kind of emotionally, I don't know if manipulates the right word, but place people in a specific type of emotional state as a group. Um, when it comes to fear of not believing, when I was like before I started grappling, like I would listen to music and
Mm-hmm.
pray. Oh my gosh, I would pray. I'd pray during soccer games to get
Mm.
goals. I would pray for other people that I wanted to help. I would pray, like if there was a thing that I thought was worth praying for, I would pray. I would pray just to tell God hi. I haven't forgotten about you. Just want to let you know I'm doing good. Thank you.
Mm.
Like, so I don't think any of that was out of
Yeah.
fear at the time, because I didn't feel like I needed to have any fear
Yeah.
back
I know
then.
for me, it was faith when I was a Christian before I became a Christian, I used to listen to a lot of rap music and then a
Mhm.
lot of slow jams,
Oh, okay.
soft music, because I would, would romance the young women and have the slow jam playing in the background. And when I became a Christian, I sort of took on this like I'm going to romance God. Like I would have worship music and like, you know,
Set the
just
mood, you and
yeah.
God.
And so I would listen to music a lot to, I guess, just get in the presence of God, as it
Sure.
were.
Yeah.
Um, this might be interesting for me to think about. I promise I need to do some serious therapy. But during the years of my deconversion, I did not listen to much music at all
Oh, interesting.
because I didn't want to be moved by anything that wasn't real. I didn't want the music to do for me what music can do for you. I wanted
Interesting.
God to do it without the props, without the
You were
smoke and
attempting to
mirrors.
remove any artificial emotional influence so
Yes.
that if you felt something, you would know where it came from and
Yes.
not even be able to accidentally attribute it to something else.
Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
interesting.
Yep.
For sure, go to therapy. For sure. Because you love music. You were depriving
Well, I'm
yourself
just
of
getting
something
back
that's a
into
part of
being in my
you.
car, being able to play music again.
Yeah.
I'm just getting back into that. Yeah.
Because that would need to be recontextualized for you entirely because your life was music
Yep.
and was
Yep.
music for God. So now
Yep.
your relationship with that needs to be entirely recontextualized.
Yep. Yeah. There's a whole thing.
And that was like intrinsic identity shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So, Richmond, thank you for that question because it's even got me thinking about how I use music.
That's an interesting question.
The American Cuban says, "Are you scared of hell? How did you get over that? Is
Mhm.
the risk of eternal hellfire worth the new life you're living?
Oh,
Can
he's
you
Pascaling
debunk?
me.
Can you debunk hell?" So there's 5 questions there. 1, 2, 3, 4 question marks there. Let's just
um,
pick 2 of them if you want.
I don't believe in God, so I don't believe in hell, so I have no fear of it. Did it take me a while emotionally to get over it? Yes, for sure.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Can I debunk hell? Well, I feel as though I the fact that I feel like I can debunk God would just de facto
Right. Hmm.
debunk hell. Like,
Hmm.
the question is posed as though you believe in God, but are acting as though you don't. Aren't you
Hmm.
worried about hell? If
Hmm.
I don't believe that God exists, and
Right.
I believe I have good reason to believe that God doesn't exist, then hell's not a concept that I feel is tenable.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, you should, like, from an internal critique perspective, you should ask yourself some questions about why hell would exist
Hmm.
for God, too, right? I mean, the problem of evil is a pretty serious internal critique when it comes to like how you model your God. Um, I don't pretend to believe what version of the Christian God you believe in because there's multiple versions of the Christian God, but most of them have a multitude of attributes that anybody would agree to, which is like perfect, self-sustaining, all-knowing, all-powerful, eternal,
Hmm.
those types of things. Um, I mean, I guess I could give you my argument for why I don't think that God exists. Like if I hold to that definition from a philosophical perspective, then creation no longer makes sense.
Hmm.
Because if there is a being who is wholly self-sustaining, perfect in and of themselves, um, and like all knowing and all good, and that being exists and precedes this creation, then there is no justification or motivation to create that doesn't negate one of those attributes. Because if you are wholly perfect and self-sustaining, you would not be motivated. You would have no motivation to feel as though that there was something that is lacking in your current
Hmm.
state that needs to be um, brought forth. If you feel as though that there is a need or a desire
Hmm.
because something is something is lacking, like if you're
Mm,
bored or want something to love or whatever you think the cognitive justification is,
right.
then you have to acknowledge that there is something that wholly
Right.
perfect being was without, required, or wanted, or had a desire for.
Mm,
And if they are wholly perfect, then there is no such thing as a state of desire.
right.
So that definition of God
Hmm.
doesn't hold water with me because
Mm,
it's internally inconsistent. And the very fact that anything exists outside of it negates its very definition.
wow. There's a lot there. There's a
So I
lot
don't
there.
believe in hell.
Yeah. There's a lot there. And that's good, like to think about that, because I know some Christians would say, um, I, I don't know if you're freezing or I'm freezing.
Oh,
I know my
am
computer,
I moving
it's
now?
it's glitchy, but I
Oh,
don't know if
okay.
it's you or if it's
I'm
me.
fine on my end. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
and I'm fine on my end, so hopefully
Okay.
it's just the visual and not the audio. But I know the Christian response is often God didn't have to create; He created, for His own sovereign pleasure or whatever His will. But like you said, if there's a pleasure that God's going to get from creating,
Mhm.
there's a pleasure that God doesn't have before
That
the
means that he was
creation.
right. He was previously lacking. He
Right.
existed in a state of desire. Like
Yeah.
there was something that wasn't a component of him, like that wasn't like an inherent component of him that he felt like would improve upon his state,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Or upon his, yeah, upon his state, upon his pleasure,
right.
upon his,
And
yeah.
definitionally, if you can improve upon that state isn't perfect. So at the very least, you have to ditch an omni, right?
Hmm.
You can't say wholly perfect. You have to
Hmm.
go and or wholly self-sustaining because just the very act of creation um would indicate that he was in a state where he felt something was absent,
Hmm.
right? And also he has emotional states like that. I mean, can God feel a negative emotion? God obviously can because he gets vengeful. So if you are perfect,
Hmm.
as how do you feel a negative emotion, especially if you're all knowing, because that means that you can project what's going to happen into infinity.
Right.
So if you can project what's going to happen into infinity
Hmm.
forever and ever and ever, and also like caused it to happen, but we can even ignore that. But you can
Hmm.
know what's going to happen into infinity. Then that means that like you set what we actually have to keep it. You set into motion a state of affairs that was going to knowingly cause you a negative emotional state, and you did it anyway. And also, you can have a negative emotional state. Also, you have emotional states.
Hmm.
Like that's
Yeah.
that's weird. Like, because wouldn't your state of being just be like whole satisfaction continuously?
Hmm.
If you were perfect, you wouldn't have additional emotional states. It would just be a consistent state of perfection. And um, what's the word I'm looking for? Contentment.
Yeah. I think the Christian in me, how would I respond to that? Because that's a good point. I think the Christian me would probably have said something like, I don't know if I would have chalked it up to in God's incomprehensibility, there's something where He cannot lack and yet still have a desire to produce. In the same way that God can desire that all men be saved and yet all won't be saved. There's something in the mystery of God where
Is
that
that a
can take
contradiction
place.
though?
Isn't everything?
I mean, I get I'm talking to you now
Right.
though.
That's
But
right.
like so you wouldn't have seen that as a contradiction though in the
No,
past.
well, not a contradiction. I would have saw it. Here's a word that was introduced to me.
Okay.
It's an antinomy. And antinomy is just two things that are contrary but both true at the same time. And we would just chalk it up as an antinomy.
But the so, so they negate each other and are both simultaneously true.
somehow,
That
somehow.
doesn't seem possible. I mean, you can label it with a word, but
In the words of Jesus, all things are possible with God.
I mean, fair enough, I guess. Sure. I mean, I'm not trying to deconvert anybody, but
Yeah, yeah.
like to answer that question, like if when somebody asks you, like, are you afraid of hell or like how do you debunk hell or whatever?
Mm.
I mean, in order to debunk hell, I would have to believe in God first. Like that's a prerequisite for thinking that hell
Yeah.
exists. So the real only answer to that question is I don't believe in God. Here's the reason. There's a multitude of reasons why, especially the Christian God.
Yeah.
That's the only real answer to that question.
Well, one of my answers I would actually call on the words of Jesus to debunk hell.
Oh, okay.
Um, because as a Christian, I never knew what to do with this. And I'm talking
Mm,
about Bible college, seminary, 30 years in evangelist, missionary. I never knew what to do with this verse.
okay.
When Jesus says he's going to tell some people, depart from me, you workers of iniquity, he's going to tell them to go to the hell fire that was prepared for Satan and his angels or his demons. But it always made me say, wait, if hell was prepared for Satan,
Mm,
yet people are going to end up there, it wasn't prepared for them?
ooh, yeah.
Like, what
Mm.
kind of heavenly hotel host are you preparing for only a few guests, but now you've got a whole slew of people going there, but you didn't
Most of the
prepare
people
for
that have
them.
existed since the
Right.
beginning of time.
But you
Yeah.
didn't prepare it for
Almost
them.
everyone.
You're,
Yeah.
you're omniscient, you're all powerful, you prepared it for Satan and his demons, and now you got people going there. That never made sense to me.
Right.
And so, can I debunk hell? I think one, looking at why there is no hell in the Old Testament. You have Sheol in the
Yeah.
Old Testament, but you don't have hell.
Right.
You don't have hell until the Jews go into captivity in Persia and then come back with these Persian ideas. Well, Babylon and then Persia, they come back with these Persian ideas, maybe even Persian ideas via the Greeks. So these Persian/Greek ideas. When
Cool.
you see where it comes from, it kind of just makes you say, I don't have to worry about that. They're concocting this. They're cobbling together this belief system and they're adding things on like Mr. Potato Head. And at some point they stick hell onto it. And I'm supposed to worry
Right.
about that today. I can't bring myself to worry about that anymore.
Right. I mean, there's some people that I feel like have good theological basis to be annihilationists too. Like
Hmm.
I think, like as with anything in the Bible,
Yeah.
depending on how you interpret it,
Yeah.
you can find theological justifications. Like if this person was interested in having dialects with other Christians, I'm certain they could find other Christians even that don't believe in that concept of hell, like don't believe in hell at all, that are annihilationists and think that that was just language that was used that wasn't intended to be literal.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because you can do all kinds of shit with the Bible. Loads of it.
Is that the end of the supers? Looks like it might be. This was a great dialogue. I'm looking forward to the comments. I'm looking forward to the interaction. Um, I have no last words other than these. Thank you so much for being who you are and for being
Oh,
how you are, for being as brilliant and resilient as you are, and allowing the watching world to glean some of your brilliance there.
that's too much, but thank you. It's
I'm looking at some of
a
these
lot to
the
absorb.
comments here.
I super appreciate it. I was very excited to come here. And I've told you often that everybody needs to hear what you have to say and that I hope more people do. And I am always, always, always more than excited to have any type of conversation with you because it's
Good
always like
stuff.
interesting and enlightening. And yeah, no, I love it. Thank you. I
Good
appreciate you
stuff.
thinking of
Yep.
me.
Thanks so much. Have a great night. Everybody in the chat, you guys have a good night. We'll see you in the comments. Much love. Peace.
Elevate the discourse.
Uh,